circumference. Samuel Rowbotham wrote, "It is evident that in the great encircling oceans of the south, and the numerous islands and parts of continents which exist beyond that part of the earth where the sun is vertical, cannot have their days and nights, seasons, etc., precisely like those in the northern region. The north is a center, and the south is that center radiated or thrown out to a vast oceanic circumference, terminating in circular walls of ice, which form an impenetrable frozen barrier. Hence, the phenomena referred to as existing in the north must be considerably modified in the south. For instance, the north being central, the light of the sun advancing and receding gives long periods of alternate light and darkness at the actual center, but in the far south, the sun, even when moving in its outer path, can only throw its light to a certain distance, beyond which there must be perpetual darkness. No evidence exists of there being long periods of light and darkness regularly alternating as in the north. In the north, in summertime, when the sun is moving in its inner path, the light shines continually for months together over the central region, and rapidly develops numerous forms of animal and vegetable life." In typical reverse-engineered damage control fashion, trying to explain away the midnight sun, problematic Arctic and Antarctic phenomena, and the fact that Polaris can be seen to 23.5 degrees south of the equator, desperate heliocentrists in the late 19th century again modified their theory to say the ball Earth actually tilts back 25.5 degrees on its vertical axis, thus explaining away many problems in one swoop. If it simply tilted the same direction constantly, however, this would still not explain the phenomena, because after 6 months of supposed orbital motion around the sun, any amount of tilt would be perfectly opposite, thus negating their alleged explanation for Arctic and Antarctic irregularities. To account for this, heliocentrists then added that the Earth also wobbles in a complex combination of patterns known as planetary nutation, the Chandler wobble, and axial precession, which, in their vivid imaginations, somehow explains away common sense. Common sense, however, says that if the heat of the sun travels 93 million miles to reach us, a small axial tilt and wobble, the difference of a few thousand miles, should be completely negligible. If the ball Earth actually spun around 93 million miles from the sun, regardless of any tilt or wobble, temperature and climate the whole world over should be almost completely uniform. If the heat of the sun truly traveled 93 million miles to reach the Earth's equator, the extra few thousand miles to the poles, regardless of any supposed tilt or wobble, no matter how extreme, would surely be negligible in negating such intense heat. E. Eschini wrote, "The supposition that the seasons are caused by the Earth's annual motion round the sun at a mean distance of 93 million miles is grotesque. According to Piazzi, the size of the sun is in proportion to the Earth as 329,360 to 1. The diameter exceeds that of the Earth 112 times. The Earth appears, as Biot says, by this statement, a mere grain of sand as compared to the sun. This enormous expanse of light, focused on a rotating grain of sand, at the distance of 93 millions of miles, would cause the same season throughout it. The paltry few miles, in comparison, that separates London from Cape Town could never cause diverse seasons, neither would the distance from London to the Riviera justify the difference in the climate that characterizes the two places. Common sense also says if the Earth were actually a ball spinning daily with uniform speed around the sun, there should be exactly 12-hour days and 12-hour nights everywhere, all year round, regardless of any alleged tilt or inclination. Half the sphere would always be lit, and the other half not. The great variety and length of days and nights throughout the year all over Earth testifies to the fact we do not live on a spinning ball planet. There cannot exist phenomena such as this on a globe, nor the midnight sun, nor anything like Antarctic winter, where the sun is nowhere to be found for over 2 months per year. NASA and modern astronomy say the Earth is a giant globe spinning 1,000 miles per hour around its central axis, traveling 67,000 mile per hour circles around the sun, spiraling 500,000 miles per hour around the Milky Way, while the entire galaxy rockets a ridiculous 670 million miles per hour through the universe, with all of these motions originating from an alleged Big Bang cosmogenic explosion 14 billion years ago. That's a grand total of 670,568,000 miles per hour in several different directions we're all supposedly speeding along at simultaneously. No one has ever seen, felt, heard, measured, or proven such motion, yet the vast majority of people unquestioningly accept that the clearly motionless earth beneath their feet is actually moving over 600 million miles per hour. NASA and modern astronomy say Polaris, the North Pole star, is somewhere between 323 and 434 light years, or about 2 quadrillion miles away from us. Firstly, note that is between 1.9 quadrillion to 2.6 quadrillion miles, making a difference of over 600 trillion miles. If modern astronomy cannot even agree on the distance to stars within hundreds of trillions of miles, perhaps their science is flawed and their theory needs re-examining. However, even granting them their obscurely distant stars, heliocentric astronomers cannot adequately explain how Polaris manages to always remain perfectly aligned straight above the North Pole. If the globe Earth was really spinning west to east 1,000 miles per hour, orbiting the sun counterclockwise at 67,000 miles per hour, spiraling around the outer arms of the Milky Way at 500,000 miles per hour, while shooting through the universe at 670 million miles per hour, how is it even conceptually possible that Polaris, 2 quadrillion miles away, day after day, year after year, always maintains its alignment straight above the North Pole? That would mean from 2 quadrillion miles away, Polaris would have to be perfectly mirroring Earth's several simultaneous wobbling, spinning, spiraling, and shooting motions. Polaris would have to be shooting the same direction through the universe at exactly 670 million miles per hour. It would have to be following the same 500,000 mile per hour, 225 million year spiral around the Milky Way, and mirroring the same 67,000 mile per hour, 365-day orbit around our sun. Or, the Earth is stationary, as common sense and everyday experience testifies. William Carpenter wrote, "It is supposed in the regular course of the Newtonian theory that the Earth is in June about 190 million miles away from its position in December. Now since we can in middle north latitudes see the North Star on looking out of a window that faces it, and out of the very same corner of the very same pane of glass in the very same window all the year round, it is proof enough for any man in his senses that we have made no motion at all." Not only this, but viewed from a ball Earth, Polaris, situated almost straight over the North Pole, should not be visible anywhere in the southern hemisphere. For Polaris to be seen from the southern hemisphere of a globular Earth, the observer would have to be somehow looking through the globe, and miles of land and sea would have to be transparent. Polaris can be seen, however, up to approximately 23.5 degrees south latitude. Dr. Robotham wrote, "If the Earth is a sphere and the pole star hangs over the northern axis, it would be impossible to see it for a single degree beyond the equator, or 90 degrees from the pole. The line of sight would become a tangent to the sphere, and consequently several thousand miles of and divergent from the direction of the pole star. Many cases, however, are on record of the North Polar Star being visible far beyond the equator, as far even as the Tropic of Capricorn." William Carpenter wrote, "The astronomer's theory of a globular Earth necessitates the conclusion that if we travel south of the equator, to see the North Star is an impossibility. Yet it is well known that this star has been seen by navigators when they have been more than 20 degrees south of the equator. This fact, like hundreds of other facts, puts the theory to shame and gives us a proof that the Earth is not a globe." To account for this glaring problem in their model, desperate heliocentrists since the late 19th century have claimed the ball Earth actually tilts a convenient 23.5 degrees back on its vertical axis. Even this brilliant revision to their theory cannot account for the visibility of many other constellations, though. For instance, Ursa Major, very close to Polaris, can be seen from 90 degrees north latitude, the North Pole, all the way down to 30 degrees south latitude. The constellation Vulpecula can be seen from 90 degrees north latitude all the way to 55 degrees south latitude. Taurus, Pisces, and Leo can be seen from 90 degrees north all the way to 65 degrees south. Aquarius and Libra can be seen from 65 degrees north to 90 degrees south. The constellation Virgo is visible from 80 degrees north down to 80 degrees south, and Orion can be seen from 85 degrees north all the way to 75 degrees south latitude. An observer on a ball Earth, regardless of any tilt or inclination, would not logically be able to see this far. Dr. Samuel Rowbotham wrote, "Another thing is certain, that from within the equator the North Pole star and the constellations Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, and many others can be seen from every meridian simultaneously, whereas in the south, from the equator, neither the so-called South Pole star nor the remarkable constellation of the Southern Cross can be seen simultaneously from every meridian, showing that all the constellations of the south, supposed pole star included, sweep over a great southern arc and across the meridian from their rise in the evening to their setting in the morning. But if the earth is a globe, Sigma Octantis, the South Pole star, and the Southern Cross, a southern circumpolar constellation, they would all be visible at the same time from every longitude on the same latitude, as is the case with the Northern Pole star and the northern circumpolar constellations. Such, however, is not the case. Some heliocentrists have even tried to suggest that the pole star's gradual declination overhead as an observer travels southwards is proof of a globular Earth. Far from it, the declination of the pole star or any other object is simply a result of the law of perspective. The law of perspective dictates that the angle and height at which an object is seen diminishes the farther one recedes from the object, until at a certain point the line of sight and the seemingly uprising surface of the earth converges to a vanishing point, i.e. the horizon line, beyond which the object is invisible. Thomas Winship wrote, "If we select a flat street a mile long containing a row of lamps, it will be noticed that from where we stand the lamps gradually decline to the ground, the last one being apparently quite on the ground. Take the lamp at the end of the street, and walk away from it 100 yards, and it will appear to be much nearer to the ground than it was when we were close to it. Keep on walking away from it, and it will appear to be gradually depressed until it is last seen on the ground and then disappears. Now, according to the astronomers, the whole mile was only depressed about 8 inches from one end to the other, so that this 8 inches could not account for the enormous depression of the light as we recede from it. This proves that the depression of the pole star can and does take place in relation to a flat surface, simply because we increase our distance from it, the same as from the street lamp. In other words, the farther away we get from any object above us, as a star for example, the more it is depressed, and if we go far enough it will sink, or appear to sink, to the horizon and then disappear. The writer has tried the street lamp many times with the same result." And Dr. Rowbotham wrote, "It has often been urged that the earth must be a globe because the stars in the southern hemisphere move round a south polar star in the same way that those of the north revolve around the northern pole star. This is another instance of the sacrifice of truth and denial of the evidence of our senses for the purpose of supporting a theory which is in every sense false and unnatural. It is known to every observer that the North Pole star is the center of a number of constellations which move over the earth in a circular direction. Those nearest to it, as the Great Bear, etc., are always visible in England during their whole 24 hours revolution. Those farther away southwards rise north-northeast and set south-southwest. Still further south they rise east by north and set west by north. The farthest south visible from England, the rising is more to the east and southeast, and the setting to the west and southwest. But all the stars visible from London rise and set in a way which is not compatible with the doctrine of rotundity. For instance, if we stand with our backs to the north, on the high land known as Arthur's Seat near Edinburgh, and note the stars in the zenith of our position, and watch for several hours, the zenith stars will gradually recede to the northwest. If we do the same on Woodhouse Moor, near Leeds, or on any of the mountain tops in Yorkshire or Derbyshire, the same phenomenon is observed. The same thing may be seen from the top of Primrose Hill near Regent's Park, London, from Hampstead Heath or Shooter's Hill near Woolwich. If we remain all night, we shall observe the same stars rising toward our position from the northeast, showing that the path of all the stars between ourselves and the northern center move round the North Pole star as a common center of rotation, just as they must do over a plane such as the earth is proved to be. It is undeniable that upon a globe zenith stars would rise, pass overhead, and set in the plane of the observer's position. If now we carefully watch in the same way the zenith stars from the Rock of Gibraltar, the very same phenomenon is observed. The same is also the case from the Cape of Good Hope, Sydney and Melbourne in Australia, in New Zealand, in Rio de Janeiro, Montevideo, Valparaiso, and other places in the south. If then the zenith stars of all the places on the earth where special observations have been made rise from the morning horizon to the zenith of an observer and descend to the evening horizon, not in a plane of the position of such observer, but in an arc of a circle concentric with the northern center, the earth is thereby proved to be a plane, and rotundity altogether disproved, shown indeed to be impossible. When you look up at the sun and moon, you see two equally sized, equidistant circles tracing similar paths at similar speeds around a flat, stationary Earth. The experts at NASA, however, claim your common sense, everyday experience is false on all counts. To begin with, they say the Earth is not flat, but a big ball. Not stationary, but spinning around 19 miles per second. They say the sun does not revolve around the earth as it appears, but earth revolves around the sun. The moon, on the other hand, does revolve around the earth, though not east to west as it appears, rather west to east, and the sun is actually 400 times larger than the moon and 400 times farther away. That's right. You can clearly see they are the same size and distance. You can see the earth is flat. You can feel the earth is stationary. But according to the gospel of modern astronomy, you are wrong and a simpleton worthy of endless ridicule if you dare to believe your own eyes and experience. With haughty arrogance, the nearest hypnotized heliocentrist will then inform you that the sun is 865,374 miles in diameter and 92,955,807 miles from the earth. The moon is 2,159 miles in diameter and 238,900 miles from the earth, and those just happen to be the exact diameters and distances necessary for a viewer from Earth to falsely perceive them as being the same size. So you see, silly flat-earther, it is all an illusion, and the apparent equanimity of our day and night luminaries in the sky results from mere coincidental parallax perspective. The sun does not revolve around the earth as it appears. Rather, the earth spins 1,038 miles per hour under your feet and revolves 67,108 miles per hour around the sun. The moon does indeed revolve around the earth, but not as it appears. Though it seems to move east to west, just like the sun and everything else in the heavens, the moon actually spins west to east at 10.3 miles per hour, while orbiting Earth at 2,288 miles per hour, which, combined with Earth's 1,038 mile per hour spin and 67,108 mile per hour orbit around the sun, coincidentally results in all motions perfectly canceling out, making the moon seem to move across the heavens with similar path and similar speed as the sun, while always only showing us one side of its surface and perpetually hiding its dark side. Bernard Brewer said, "The moon presented a special math problem for the construction of the heliocentric model. The only way to make the moon fit in with the other assumptions was to reverse its direction from that of what everyone who has ever lived has seen it go. The math model couldn't just stop the moon like it did the sun, that wouldn't work, and it couldn't let it continue to go east to west as we see it go either, at the same speed or at a different speed. The only option was to reverse its observed east to west direction and change its speed from about 64,000 miles an hour to about 2,200 miles an hour. This reversal, along with the change in speed, were unavoidable assumptions that needed to be adopted if the model was to have any chance of mimicking reality." And Marshall Hall said, They want you to believe that the moon's rotation is perfectly synchronized with its orbit, so that's why we only ever see one side of the moon, rather than conclude the obvious, that the moon is simply not rotating. Moreover, they had to slow down the moon's speed by 58,870 miles per hour and reverse its direction to west to east to successfully sell their phony heliocentricity system to a gullible public. I don't think there is one person in many, many thousands, regardless of education, who knows that the Copernican model had to turn the moon's observable direction around and give it a new speed to accommodate the phases and eclipses. William Carpenter said, "Astronomers tell us that the moon goes round the earth in about 28 days. Well, we may see her making her journey around every day if we make use of our eyes, and these are about the best things we have to use. The moon falls behind in her daily motion as compared with that of the sun, to the extent of 1 revolution in the time specified. But that is not making a revolution. Failing to go as fast as other bodies go in one direction does not constitute a going round in the opposite one, as the astronomers would have us believe. And since all this absurdity has been rendered necessary for no other purpose than to help other absurdities along, it is clear that the astronomers are on the wrong track." There are several theories about the relative size and distance of the sun and moon, all with their points of evidence and points of contention. Flat earthers throughout the ages have used sextants and plane trigonometry attempting to make such calculations, usually concluding the sun and moon both to be only about 32 miles in diameter and less than a few thousand miles from Earth. Perhaps the least plausible model, certainly the most exaggerated and imaginative, is the reigning heliocentric theory, claiming the sun to be a whopping 865,374 miles in diameter, 92,955,807 miles from the Earth, and the moon 2,159 miles in diameter, 238,900 miles from the Earth. Heliocentrists' astronomical figures always sound perfectly precise, but they have historically been notorious for regularly and drastically changing them to suit their various models. For instance, in his time, Copernicus calculated the sun's distance from Earth to be 3,391,200 miles. The next century, Johannes Kepler decided it was actually 12,376,800 miles away. Isaac Newton once said, "It matters not whether we reckon it 28 or 54 million miles distant, for either would do just as well." How scientific! Benjamin Martin calculated between 81 and 82 million miles. Thomas Dilworth claimed 93,726,900 miles. John Hind stated positively 95,298,260 miles. Benjamin Gould said more than 96 million miles, and Christian Mayer thought it was more than 104 million. Thomas Winship says, "As the sun, according to science, may be anything from 3 to 104 million miles away, there is plenty of space to choose from. It is like the showman and the child. You pay your money for various astronomical works, and you take your choice as to what distance you wish the sun to be. If you are a modest person, go in for a few millions, but if you wish to be very scientific and to be mathematically certain of your figures, then I advise you to make your choice somewhere about 100 millions. You will at least have plenty of space to retreat into should the next calculation be against the figures of your choice. You can always add a few millions to keep up with the times, or take off as many as may be required to adjust the distance to the very latest accurate column of figures. Talk about ridicule. The whole of modern astronomy is like a farcical comedy, full of surprises. One never knows what monstrous or ludicrous absurdity may come forth next. You must not apply the ordinary rules of common sense to astronomical guesswork. No, the thing would fall to pieces if you did. Regiments of figures are paraded with all the learned jargon for which science is famous, but one might as well look at the changing clouds in the sky and seek for certainty there, as to expect to get it from the propounders of modern astronomy. But there is no means of testing these ever-changing, never-stable speculations and bringing them to the scrutiny of hard logic and fact. Indeed there is. The distance of the sun can be measured with much precision, the same way as a tree or a house or a church steeple is measured, by plane triangulation. It is the principle on which a house is built, a table made, or a man of war constructed. The sun is always somewhere between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, a distance admitted to be less than 3,000 miles. How, then, can the sun, if it be so many thousands miles in diameter, squeeze itself into a space of about 3,000 miles only? But look at the distance, say the professors. We have already done that, and not one of the wise men we have so often challenged has ever attempted to refute the principle on which we measure the sun's distance. If the navigator neglects to apply the sun's semi-diameter to his observation at sea, he is 16 nautical miles out in calculating the position his ship is in. A minute of arc on the sextant represents a nautical mile, and if the semi-diameter be 16 miles, the diameter is of course 32 miles, and as measured by the sextant, the sun's diameter is 32 minutes of arc, that is, 32 nautical miles in diameter. Let him disprove this who can. If ever disproof is attempted, it will be a literary curiosity well worth framing. Measuring with sextants and calculating with plane trigonometry, both the sun and moon figure to be only about 32 miles in diameter and approximately 3,000 miles away. The moon is actually a semi-transparent luminary, and not the solid, spherical desert planet that NASA would have us believe. In fact, it is likely that both the sun and moon are not densely physical at all, and are simply luminous flat disks able to pass by or through one another during eclipses. E. Eschini said, "The results of recent research prove that the heavenly luminaries are not worlds, but lights, and should cause all men who have been led to accept as proven Copernicus's theory of the motions of the earth to reconsider this subject." Gabrielle Henriette said, "The satellites of the earth are not masses of matter. They are luminous and transparent disks without substance. The moon, in particular, conveys the impression of being an ethereal manifestation, and the uncertain and elusive character which is usually associated with this satellite results precisely from its immaterial nature. It was recognized from the earliest times that the satellites of the earth, particularly the sun and the moon, were not solid, opaque bodies. They were first, until Aristotle, considered to be souls or spirits, which does not imply a physical nature. To the ancients, they were simply lights, and they gave the sun and the moon a very apt name. They called them luminaries. In the flat earth model, the sun and moon luminaries revolve around the earth once every 24 hours for the sun, and approximately 25 hours for the moon, illuminating like spotlights the areas over which they pass. The sun's annual journey from tropic to tropic, solstice to solstice, is what determines the length and character of days, nights, and seasons. This is why equatorial regions experience almost year-round summer and heat, while higher latitudes north and especially south experience more distinct seasons with harsh winters. The heliocentric model claims seasons change based on the ball Earth's alleged axial tilt and elliptical orbit around the sun. Their flawed current model even places us closest to the sun, 91,400,000 miles, in January, when it is actually winter, and farthest from the sun, 94,500,000 miles, in July, when it's actually summer throughout much of the Earth. They say due to the ball Earth's tilt, different places receive different amounts of direct sunlight, and that is what produces the seasonal and temperature changes. This makes little sense, however, because if the sun's heat travels over 90 million miles to reach the ball Earth, how could a slight tilt, a mere few thousand miles maximum, negate the sun's 90 million mile journey, giving us simultaneous tropical summers and Antarctic winters? Thomas Winship said, "The Earth is a stretched-out structure which diverges from the central north in all directions towards the south. The equator, being midway between the north center and the southern circumference, divides the course of the sun into north and south declination. The longest circle around the world which the sun makes is when it has reached its greatest southern declination. Gradually going northwards, the circle is contracted. In about 3 months after the southern extremity of its path has been reached, the sun makes a circle round the equator. Still pursuing a northerly course as it goes round and above the world, in another 3 months the greatest northern declination is reached. when the sun again begins to go towards the south. In north latitudes, when the sun is going north, it rises earlier each day, is higher at noon, and sets later, while in southern latitudes at the same time, the sun as a matter of course rises later, reaches a lesser altitude at noon, and sets earlier. In northern latitudes, during the southern summer, say from September to December, the sun rises later each day, is lower at noon, and sets earlier, while in the south he rises earlier, reaches a higher altitude at noon, and sets later each day. This movement round the earth daily is the cause of the alternations of day and night, while his northerly and southerly courses produce the seasons. When the sun is south of the equator, it is summer in the south and winter in the north, and vice versa. The fact of the alternation of the seasons flatly contradicts the Newtonian delusion that the earth revolves in an orbit round the sun. It is said that summer is caused by the earth being nearest the sun, and winter by its being farthest from the sun. But if the reader will follow the argument in any textbook, he will see that according to the theory, when the earth is nearest the sun, there must be summer in both northern and southern latitudes, and in like manner, when it is farthest from the sun, it must be winter all over the earth at the same time, because the whole of the globe earth would then be farthest from the sun. In short, it is impossible to account for the recurrence of seasons on the assumption that the earth is globular and that it revolves in an orbit around the sun. Gabrielle Henriette said, "The essential feature of the year is its division into 2 equal periods of 6 months, based first on the predominating length of the days over that of the nights, and vice versa, conditions which are governed by the varying hours of sunrise and sunset, and secondly, by the either high or low height reached by the sun in the heavens at midday. The first cycle, during which the days are longer than the nights, and the sun reaches its culminating point of the year, extends from the spring equinox to the autumn equinox, i.e. March 21st to September 22nd, and the second cycle, during which, inversely, the duration of the nights exceeds that of the days, and the sun descends to its lowest point of the year, extends from the autumn equinox to the spring equinox, i.e. September 23rd to March 20th. These 2 6-month periods are also characterized by an opposition of temperature. During the first cycle, which corresponds to spring and summer, the heat gradually rises and falls, while during the second cycle, which comprises autumn and winter, it is the intensity of the cold which progressively increases and decreases. In the flat Earth model, the sun and moon spotlights are perpetually hovering over and parallel to the surface of the Earth. From our vantage point, due to the law of perspective, the day and night luminaries appear to rise up the eastern horizon, curve peaking high overhead, and then sink below the western horizon. They do not escape to the underside of the flat Earth, as one might imagine, but rather rotate concentric clockwise circles around the circumference from tropic to tropic. The appearance of rising, peaking, and setting is due to the common law of perspective, where tall objects appear high overhead when nearby, but at a distance gradually lower towards the vanishing point. Samuel Rowbotham said, "Although the sun is at all times above and parallel to the earth's surface, he appears to ascend the firmament from morning until noon, and to descend and sink below the horizon at evening. This arises from a simple and everywhere visible law of perspective. A flock of birds, when passing over a flat or marshy country, always appears to descend as it recedes, and if the flock is extensive, the first bird appears lower or nearer to the horizon than the last. The farthest light in a row of lamps appears the lowest, although each one has the same altitude. Bearing these phenomena in mind, it will easily be seen how the sun, although always parallel to the surface of the earth, must appear to ascend when approaching and descend after leaving the meridian or noonday position. What can be more common than the observation that, standing at one end of a long row of lamp-posts, those nearest to us seem to be the highest, and those farthest away the lowest, whilst, as we move along towards the opposite end of the series, those which we approach seem to get higher, and those we are leaving behind appear to gradually become lower. It is an ordinary effect of perspective for an object to appear lower and lower as the observer goes farther and farther away from it. Let anyone try the experiment of looking at a lighthouse, church spire, monument, gas lamp, or other elevated object from a distance of only a few yards, and notice the angle at which it is observed. On going farther away, the angle under which it is seen will diminish, and the object will appear lower and lower as the distance of the observer increases, until, at a certain point, the line of sight to the object, and the apparently uprising surface of the earth upon or over which it stands, will converge to the angle which constitutes the vanishing point, or the horizon, beyond which it will be invisible. Heliocentrist would have you believe the very opposite of what every human who has ever walked the earth has seen with their own eyes. It is obvious to any child and sovereign-minded adult that the sun, moon, stars, and planets, every light in the sky above, revolves around the motionless earth beneath our feet. It is also plain to see that the sun and moon are both approximately the same size and situated relatively close to earth, not 400 times divergent and millions upon millions of miles away. To abandon your senses and everyday experience in favor of such unfounded science fiction fantasies is a fallacy of appeal to authority so extreme that it leaves the brainwashed believer impotent to trust his own natural instincts and forever thereafter chained to the fantastical explanations of astronomical charlatans. Thomas Winship said, "No one ever yet felt or saw the earth careening through space at the terrific rates it is credited with, but everyone who is not blind can see the sun move. But the matter can be tested. It may be known for certain whether the sun moves or not. Take a school globe and place a style on the semicircle that holds it in position. Cause the globe to rotate against a lamp on a table, and you will find that the shadow left on the globe is always parallel to the equator, at whatever angle you may incline the globe. Further, let the style be of sufficient length to allow the shadow to fall on a flat surface, moving the globe towards the lamp, and the shadow will be a straight line. If, therefore, the shadow left on the earth by the sun be a straight line, then undoubtedly the sun is stationary. Drive a stake into the ground in such a position as to expose it to the sun for the greater part of a day, the whole day if possible. Mark the end of the shadow every quarter of an hour, and you will find that the marks form part of an elongated curve clearly proving that the sun moves over a stationary earth." And David Wardlaw Scott said, "The path of the sun is concentric, expanding and contracting daily for 6 months alternately. This is easily proved by fixing a rod, say at noon on the 21st of December, so that on looking along it, the line of vision will touch the lower edge of the sun. This line of sight will continue for several days pretty much the same, but on the 9th or 10th day, it will be found that the rod will have to be moved considerably toward the zenith in order to touch the lower edge of the sun, and every day afterwards it will have to be raised till the 22nd of June. Then there will be a little change for a few days, as before, but day by day afterward the rod will have to be lowered till the 21st of December, when the sun is farthest from the northern center and it is dark there. This expansion and contraction of the sun's path continues every year, and is termed the northern and southern declination, and should demonstrate to modern astronomers the absurdity of calling the world a planet, as it remains stationary, while the sun continues circling round the heavens. In the heliocentric model, Earth is just one of 8 planets in our solar system, all of which are said to be huge spherical Earth-like habitations or globular gas giants millions of miles away. They claim the Earth under our feet, along with these 7 other planets, all revolve concentric circles or ellipses around the Sun, hence the term heliocentric. The previously prevailing geocentric model had placed Earth as the immovable center of the universe, with the sun, moon, stars, and planets all revolving around us, just as they appear. In the heliocentric model, however, which would be more appropriately titled the acentric model, the sun is only the center of our solar system, while itself supposedly simultaneously revolving 500,000 mile-per-hour spirals around the Milky Way galaxy, which itself is constantly shooting 670 million miles per hour away from an alleged Big Bang creationary explosion at the beginning of time. In the geocentric model, the 7 planets were known as wandering stars, with the multitude of other stars known as fixed stars. The wandering stars were so called because they can be seen meandering their own unique paths around the heavens, while all the other stars remain fixed in their steady group rotation around Polaris. The wandering stars also happen to be among the brightest in the night sky, and just as heliocentrists falsely claim the moon to be a mere reflector of the sun's light, they claim the bright starlight of these planets is merely them reflecting the sun's light back at us. This has already been shown to be geometrically impossible, however, as convex bodies do not and cannot reflect light in this way. In the heliocentric model, the wandering stars are all supposedly spherical Earth-like places several million miles away from us, while the fixed stars are all allegedly super-distant suns, similar to our own, but several trillion miles away, complete with their own solar systems and accompanying planets, perhaps even populated with sentient alien beings like ourselves. NASA's current official astronomical statistics state that there are upwards of 10 trillion such planets in our galaxy alone, and at least 200 billion galaxies in the universe. Therefore, they claim Earth is only one of 1 septillion planets in the universe. David Wardlaw Scott said, "Our modern astronomers imagine the stars to be immense worlds or suns, some of them many thousands of times larger than our own, and at an enormous distance. Sir Robert Ball, in his Cause of an Ice Age, says of Sirius that it is 1,000,000 times as distant from us as the sun, that it is 92 millions of miles from the earth. It is thought that stars are in a more or less advanced state of development, and that probably some of them may be already inhabited by beings suited to their spheres. Their distance from us they calculate to be so immense that, according to Sir William Herschel, the light from some of them will take 1,000 years to reach this world of ours." Dr. Samuel Rowbotham said, "Again, these stars are assumed to have positions so far from the earth that the distance is almost inexpressible. Figures, indeed, may be arranged on paper, but in reading them no practical idea is conveyed to the mind. Many are said to be so distant that they should fall with the velocity of light, or above 160,000 miles in a second of time, 600 million miles per hour. They would require nearly 2,000,000 years to reach the earth." Sir William Herschel, in a paper on the power of telescopes to penetrate into space, affirms that with his powerful instruments he discovered brilliant luminaries so far from the earth that the light which they emitted could not have been less than 1,900,000 years in its progress. Albert Smith said, "The fixed stars are so called because, except for very long periods, they do not appreciably alter their relative positions, and they are mere points of light, so small that the most powerful telescopes cannot magnify them into disks, yet they are supposed to be suns of immense size removed by the astronomers to immeasurable distance away from us for the credit and convenience of their theories." NASA even claims to have sent several remote-controlled flying telescopes, like the popular Hubble camera, into outer space, transmitting back to Earth pictorial proof of the validity of their model. These Hubble pictures show that the wandering stars are all in fact spherical Earth-like planets, just as the heliocentrists claimed all along. The Hubble pictures show that the fixed stars are also in fact distant suns, trillions of miles away, just as the heliocentrists claimed. The Hubble pictures and videos, all of which are indistinguishable from a good Photoshop or Hollywood production, completely confirm for hypnotized heliocentrists the truth of NASA's claims and the existence of various celestial phenomena which only NASA and their advanced cameras can show, like planets, galaxies, black holes, quasars, etc. Using even the most advanced non-NASA telescopes, however, the fixed and wandering stars appear to be nothing more than tiny dots of multicolored light. It cannot be ascertained whether fixed stars are actually distant suns, whether wandering stars are actually Earth-like planets, or whether any of NASA's claims hold any validity outside of their alleged pictorial evidence from these supposed remote-control flying space telescope images. Outside of NASA, what evidence do we have that stars are actually distant solar systems? What evidence do we have that planets are Earth-like places in space? They are certainly interesting and plausible ideas, but there is absolutely no empirical evidence to support them. In fact, if NASA hadn't implanted such ideas into their heads, very few people would ever look up at the night sky and assume those little pinpricks of light were all Earth-like objects millions of miles away, or suns trillions of miles away, complete with orbiting planets and moons just like ours. The only reason people believe wandering stars are Earth-like planets and fixed stars are distant suns is because of NASA propaganda. As Gabrielle Henriette said, the planets are not solid, opaque masses of matter as is believed. They are simply immaterial, luminous, and transparent disks.